An Italian economist once wrote that the number of stupid people in the world is far greater than you think. He didn't mean it as an insult, he meant it as a scientific observation backed by decades of studying human behaviour across centuries. His name was Carlo Maria Cipolla, and the essay that made him famous wasn't about economics at all. It was about stupidity. Cipolla died in the year 2000, having spent his life studying money, plague, clocks, and the irrational patterns of human civilization. He wrote books that changed how historians understood medieval Europe. He taught at Berkeley for 30 years. He won every major prize in his field. Yet most people who know his name today know it because of 5 laws about stupidity that he wrote as a joke for his friends. The joke became a bestseller. The joke outlived everything else. That disconnect tells you something important. The man who explained economic history to thousands of students, who revolutionized how we think about technological change, who traced the flow of money through Renaissance Italy, ended up being remembered for a satirical essay about idiots. Was that ironic? Fitting? Both? Carlo Maria Cipolla was born in Pavia, Italy, on August 15th, 1922. The city sits about 20 miles south of Milan, straddling the Ticino River. Medieval walls, cobblestone streets, the kind of place where history isn't something you study, it's something you walk past every day on your way to buy bread. He arrived during the brief window between 2 catastrophes. World War I had ended 4 years earlier. World War II was 17 years away. Italy was lurching toward fascism under Mussolini, who had seized power the month before Cipolla was born. The country was trying to figure out what it wanted to be. So was the boy. His childhood happened in the shadow of creeping authoritarianism. By the time he was 10, Italy had invaded Ethiopia. By the time he was 17, it was fighting alongside Nazi Germany. These weren't abstract historical events. They were the backdrop to everything, the constant hum underneath daily life. We don't know much about his family. The records are sparse. No dramatic origin story, no tales of hardship or privilege that obviously explain the trajectory that followed. He was simply a boy in Pavia during a complicated time, smart enough to notice things, curious enough to ask questions. What we do know is that by the time he reached university age in 1940, Europe was engulfed in war. He enrolled at the University of Pavia to study political science. Not economics, not history, political science. His goal was modest, almost pedestrian. He wanted to teach history and philosophy in an Italian high school. That was the ambition. A secure job, a decent life, nothing extraordinary. The war made normal impossible. He was a university student in a fascist country, allied with Hitler, studying while cities burned and empires collapsed. He graduated in 1944, right as everything was falling apart. The Allies had landed in Normandy. Italy had switched sides. German troops occupied the north. Pavia was in the occupation zone. Getting a degree under those circumstances was an achievement. Surviving was an achievement. Cipolla did both. But something else happened during those years, something that changed the direction of his life entirely. He met a professor named Franco Borlandi. Borlandi specialised in medieval economic history. This was not a glamorous field. It meant spending months in dusty archives, deciphering account books from dead merchants, tracking grain prices across centuries, trying to understand how money moved through societies that existed 600 years ago. It required patience, precision, and a particular kind of obsessive attention to detail. Cipolla discovered he loved it. The transformation happened gradually, the way most important changes do. He'd enrolled wanting to teach high school. He discovered he wanted to understand how economies actually functioned across time. How did medieval Florence become so wealthy? Why did some cities thrive while others collapsed? What made the Venetian Republic's monetary system work for centuries? These weren't just academic puzzles. They were detective stories where the clues were buried in archives, and the victims had been dead for half a millennium. Borlandi recognized something in the young student. Talent, maybe. More likely, he recognized the specific combination of intelligence and temperament required for this particular kind of work. Economic history demands both mathematical rigor and historical imagination. You need to be comfortable with numbers, but also comfortable with ambiguity. You need to see patterns, but also understand that every pattern has exceptions. Under Borlandi's mentorship, Cipolla's focus narrowed and deepened. He wasn't just studying history anymore. He was studying how societies produced, distributed, and consumed resources across time. How technology shaped economic possibilities. How institutions emerged to manage trade and credit. How plagues and famines rippled through interconnected systems. The war ended in 1945. Italy was devastated, physically and economically. But for a young scholar interested in economic history, the wreckage provided a strange kind of clarity. You could see in real time how systems broke down and rebuilt themselves, how currencies collapsed and stabilized, how societies reorganized their production around scarcity. Cipolla kept working. In 1949, at age 27, he became a full professor of economic history at the University of Catania in Sicily. 27. That's younger than most people finish their PhDs today. The appointment reflected both his exceptional abilities and the recognition he'd already earned. Italian academia could be conservative and hierarchical, but it also knew how to identify talent. Catania gave him a platform. More importantly, it gave him resources, access to libraries, time to research, students to teach and learn from. He spent 4 years there, establishing himself, building his reputation, figuring out what kind of scholar he wanted to be. The answer, it turned out, was unusual. Cipolla didn't want to specialize narrowly. He didn't want to become the expert on one specific topic who spent 40 years mining the same small vein of material. He wanted range. He wanted to understand monetary systems and public health and technological innovation and population dynamics. He wanted to write books that scholars would respect and general readers could actually enjoy. This was harder than it sounds. Academic incentives pushed towards specialization. Journals wanted expertise. Tenure committees wanted depth. But Cipolla was building something different. He was developing a methodology that combined rigorous quantitative analysis with narrative storytelling. Numbers mattered. Archives mattered. But so did the human dimension, the concrete lives of actual people making decisions in specific moments. In 1953, everything expanded again. He received a Fulbright Fellowship to study in the United States. This wasn't just a research opportunity. It was a window into a completely different academic culture. American universities operated differently than Italian ones. They had more resources, different priorities, a different relationship between teaching and research. Cipolla spent time at multiple institutions, absorbing methods, making connections, figuring out how American economic historians approached their work. The experience was formative. He saw that American scholars were often less concerned with theoretical elegance and more focused on empirical investigation. They wanted data. They wanted to test hypotheses against evidence. They were comfortable with provisional conclusions and messy realities. He returned to Italy, changed, not converted exactly. He didn't abandon European intellectual traditions, but he'd added new tools, new perspectives. He could move between different scholarly worlds now, translating between traditions, synthesizing approaches that others saw as incompatible. In 1953, he moved to the University of Venice, then Turin in 1961, then Pavia in 1965, returning to his hometown as an established scholar. Each move represented professional advancement, but also intellectual expansion. Different universities meant different archives, different colleagues, different questions. Venice gave him access to the extraordinary records of the Venetian republics. Turin connected him to networks of scholars working on industrial history. Pavia, his home city, provided both personal roots and academic prestige. He was building a career that spanned institutions, that drew on multiple traditions, that refused to stay in one lane. But the most important move was still coming. In 1957, Cipolla returned to the United States, this time to the University of California, Berkeley, as a visiting professor. 2 years later, they offered him a full professorship. He accepted. This created an unusual arrangement. He held simultaneous professorships at Berkeley and at Italian universities. For more than 30 years, he and his American-born wife, Aura, would spend late summer and autumn in California, then return to Italy for spring and early summer. They lived between worlds, maintaining homes on 2 continents, teaching in 2 countries, participating in 2 academic cultures. It shouldn't have worked. The logistics alone were complicated. This was before email, before easy international communication, before the infrastructure that makes such arrangements possible today. Coordinating teaching schedules, maintaining research projects, managing 2 households across an ocean, all of it required constant negotiation and planning. Yet it did work. Cipolla made it work because the dual appointment gave him something rare and valuable: access. Berkeley provided resources, a major research library, brilliant colleagues, graduate students. Italy provided the archives he needed for his research, the historical documents that formed the foundation of his work, the cultural context that informed his understanding. More than that, the arrangement reflected who he was becoming. Not quite Italian, not quite American, both and neither. A scholar without a single institutional home, drawing from multiple traditions, writing for multiple audiences, refusing to be defined by geography or national intellectual culture. This wasn't exile. This wasn't rootlessness. This was something more deliberate. Cipolla was constructing a scholarly identity that transcended borders. He was positioning himself at the intersection of different approaches, different archives, different ways of understanding the past. His wife Aura made this possible. The sources don't tell us much about their relationship, about how they met or what their marriage was like, but the fact that she was American clearly mattered. It meant she understood both worlds. It meant she could navigate both cultures. It meant the transatlantic life they built wasn't one person dragging another across continents, but 2 people creating something together. The pattern they established, Berkeley in fall and winter, Italy in spring and summer, became the rhythm of his life. He wasn't commuting. He was inhabiting 2 places fully, maintaining real presence in both locations, contributing to both scholarly communities. And during those early years at Berkeley, during those first seasons of moving back and forth across the Atlantic, he was beginning the research that would produce his most important work: books about monetary systems in Renaissance Italy, studies of technological innovation and European expansion, investigations into public health responses to plague, analysis of how mechanical clocks transformed European culture. The books were starting to accumulate. The reputation was growing. To change, though not in the way anyone to change, though not in the way anyone expected, because Cipolla was also starting to write something else, something shorter, something satirical, something that would eventually make him more famous than all his serious scholarship combined. But that essay, those 5 laws, that worldwide recognition, all of that was still years away. First, he had work to do, real work, the kind that would establish him as one of the most innovative economic historians of the 20th century, even if most people would never read a word of it. That serious scholarship started with money. Not money as we think of it now, abstraction on screens, but physical coins moving through medieval hands, wearing down, being clipped, debased, reminted, the stuff you could hold and weigh and bite to test its silver content. Cipolla's first major work appeared in 1952, published in French. Mouvement monétaire dans l'État de Milan, 1580 to 1700. Currency movements in the state of Milan across more than a century. Not exactly bestseller material, but the book did something that hadn't been done before, at least not with this level of precision. It tracked how money actually moved through an economy over generations, reconstructing patterns from account books and mint records, showing how monetary policy decisions made by rulers reverberated through price levels and trade flows. This was economic history, but not the kind that reduces everything to numbers and models. Cipolla was interested in what people did with money, how they thought about it, what happened when they tried to manipulate it. He was working in archives, dusty repositories of documents that most historians ignored because they seemed too technical, too boring. Bills of exchange, mint accounts, records of currency debasement, the administrative paperwork of dead economies. But Cipolla saw something others missed. These weren't just numbers, they were human decisions frozen in ink. Every debasement represented a desperate government trying to stretch resources. Every exchange rate fluctuation revealed merchant networks adjusting to new realities. Every mint record showed craftsmen transforming metal into money, creating liquidity, enabling trade. The Milan book established him as an expert on monetary history, but it was narrow, specialized. The kind of work that gets you tenure and respect from other specialists, but doesn't reach beyond academic circles. What came next was different. In 1956, he published Money, Prices and Civilization in the Mediterranean World, 5th to 17th century. The scope had expanded dramatically. Not one city-state across a century, but an entire region across 12 centuries. The transition from Byzantine gold to medieval silver to early modern bimetallism. The rise and fall of monetary systems as empires came and went. And buried in that technical analysis was an argument about something bigger. Money wasn't neutral. It wasn't just a medium of exchange that economists could abstract away. The monetary system shaped what was possible. It enabled certain kinds of economic activity and prevented others. It distributed power. It created winners and losers. It was, in short, one of the fundamental structures that determined how civilizations developed. This was the kind of insight that could only come from someone who'd spent years in the archives, but wasn't trapped there. Cipolla was connecting specific evidence to general patterns, micro-history to macro-history, exactly what the Balsan Prize citation would later praise him for. He was showing that you could be rigorous about sources and ambitious about implications. The books kept coming. In 1962, The Economic History of World Population, or this one was different again. Shorter, more accessible, written for students, not specialists. It traced demographic patterns globally, showing how population growth and economic development interacted across different societies and time periods. And it was translated, eventually, into 13 languages. Danish, Japanese, Polish, languages that Cipolla himself didn't speak. The book was reaching audiences he'd never meet, students in universities he'd never visit, becoming a standard text in economic history courses worldwide. This matters because it reveals something about how Cipolla worked. He wasn't writing one kind of book. He was operating at multiple levels simultaneously. Technical monographs for specialists, broader syntheses for scholars in adjacent fields, accessible textbooks for students. Each project served a different purpose, reached a different audience, demonstrated a different aspect of his range. But the most ambitious project came in 1965. Guns, Sales and Empires, Technological Innovation and the Early Phases of European Expansion, 1400 to 1700. Here's the question Cipolla was asking. How did Europe, which in 1400 was weak, fragmented, technologically backward compared to the great Asian empires, manage to conquer most of the world within 3 centuries? The standard answer was vague. Superior culture, more rational thinking, God's favour, explanations that explained nothing. Cipolla had a different idea: guns and ships, specifically the combination of guns and ships. The development of artillery that could be mounted on ocean-going vessels, creating mobile fortresses that could project power across vast distances. This wasn't about European superiority in some abstract sense. It was about a specific technological advantage, achieved partly through innovation and partly through accident. The book traced the development of both technologies. Guns evolved from siege weapons to field artillery to naval cannons, each iteration solving specific problems and creating new possibilities. Ships evolved from coastal vessels to caravels to galleons, each design extending range and carrying capacity. And when you put effective artillery on ships that could cross oceans, you got something unprecedented: military power that could reach anywhere there was water. But Cipolla wasn't just celebrating European ingenuity, he was examining the full system. How did you build these ships? You needed timber from specific forests, iron from specific mines, craftsmen with specific skills. How did you crew them? You needed sailors who could navigate, soldiers who could fight, officers who could command. How did you pay for them? You needed capital accumulation, credit systems, organised states capable of long-term investment. The book ranged from bell casting in England to Jesuit missions in China, from metallurgy to diplomacy. Because to explain European expansion, you had to explain the entire apparatus that made it possible. The technology was crucial, but technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires social organisation, economic resources, political structures that can mobilise and sustain the effort. This was economic history, but it was also military history, technological history, cultural history. Cipolla was refusing to stay within disciplinary boundaries, drawing on whatever sources and methods helped answer the question. And the book worked. It became influential, widely cited, translated into multiple languages. It showed that you could write serious scholarship that was also readable, that addressed big questions without sacrificing rigour. Then in 1967, Clocks and Culture, 1300 to 1700, a completely different topic approached with the same method. How did mechanical timekeeping develop, and what did it do to European society? Before mechanical clocks, time was marked by church bells, by the sun's position, by the rhythm of agricultural seasons. It was approximate, flexible, tied to natural and religious cycles. Mechanical clocks changed that. They made time uniform, divisible, measurable with precision. You could coordinate activities in new ways. You could measure productivity. You could organize labor differently. Cipolla traced this transformation through 4 centuries, showing how a technical innovation gradually reshaped culture. The first mechanical clocks were built by monasteries to regulate prayer schedules. Then cities installed public clocks. Then wealthy individuals bought private clocks. Eventually, clockmaking became an industry. Precision timekeeping became standard, and European society had reorganized itself around mechanical time. This was cultural history informed by economic analysis. The spread of clocks wasn't random. It reflected economic needs, social structures, power relationships. Who controlled time controlled productivity. The ability to measure hours precisely enabled new forms of labor discipline, new ways of extracting surplus, new relationships between workers and employers. And Cipolla did all this in a short book, under 200 pages in most editions, dense with information but never cluttered, moving efficiently from point to point without digression. The clarity that his colleagues always noted, the directness that made his book so readable. What's remarkable about this period, the 1960s when these books appeared, is the sheer range. Monetary systems, population dynamics, military technology, timekeeping culture. Most scholars specialize. They find a narrow topic and dig deep. becoming experts on increasingly specific questions. Cipolla did the opposite. He kept expanding his scope, taking on new topics, applying his methods to different problems. But there was coherence underneath the variety. Every book was asking the same basic question. How do material conditions, technological capabilities, and economic structures shape what societies can do? How do these factors enable certain possibilities and foreclose others? The approach was materialist without being reductionist. Cipolla never claimed that economics explained everything. Culture mattered, ideas mattered, individual decisions mattered. But they mattered within constraints, within possibilities shaped by the material world. And understanding those constraints meant understanding the economics, the technology, the physical stuff that societies worked with. His colleagues recognized what he was doing. The positions kept coming. Turin in 1961, Pavia in 1965. Each move a step up, more prestige, more resources, better students. And alongside the Italian appointments, Berkeley was becoming more central. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He was a full professor with tenure, with graduate students, with institutional power. The dual appointment was working. More than working, it was productive in ways a single position couldn't have been. Berkeley gave him access to one set of resources. Italy gave him access to another. The combination made possible research that neither location alone could have supported, and he was starting to get invited places, named lectureships, the kind of thing that signals you've arrived. In 1953, barely a year after arriving in America as a Fulbright Fellow, he delivered the Taft Lectures at the University of Cincinnati. He was 31 years old. Most scholars don't get invited to give named lectures until they're established, mid-career at earliest. Cipolla was being recognized as significant before he'd even hit his stride. The invitations kept coming. European universities, American universities, Cambridge, Wisconsin, everywhere that took economic history seriously. He was building a reputation that transcended national boundaries, that positioned him as a leader in the field internationally, not just in Italy or America, but globally. The writing style helped. Cipolla wrote clearly. This sounds trivial, but it's not. Academic writing is often terrible, cluttered with jargon, organized poorly, afraid to make direct claims. Cipolla wrote like someone who had something to say and knew how to say it. Short books, clear arguments, evidence presented efficiently, conclusions stated plainly. Reviewers kept noting this. The books were praised for their clarity, their elegance, their accessibility. They worked for specialists who wanted rigorous analysis and for general readers who wanted to learn something about the past. That combination is rare. Most scholars write either for other specialists or for popular audiences, but not both. Cipolla managed both, sometimes in the same book. By the late 1960s, he was established, internationally recognized, publishing regularly, training graduate students, serving on editorial boards and prize committees. The kind of position most scholars spend entire careers trying to reach, he'd achieved by his mid-40s. But he wasn't done. The most important work was still ahead. Books about plague and public health that would transform how historians thought about epidemic disease. Studies of pre-industrial economic development that would become standard references. And eventually, though nobody knew it yet, a satirical essay about stupidity that would reach more people than everything else he'd written combined. The serious scholarship was accumulating. The reputation was growing. But the scholar himself remained somewhat invisible outside academic circles, known to specialists, respected by colleagues, largely unknown to everyone else. That was about to change, though the change would come from an unexpected direction and take a form nobody anticipated. The plague work started almost by accident. Cipolla was researching something else entirely, digging through archives in Tuscany, looking for monetary records, and he found something different. Health board documents, detailed bureaucratic, obsessively thorough records of how Italian cities tried to manage epidemic disease in the 16th and 17th centuries. Most historians would have noted the documents and moved on. They weren't what he was looking for, but Cipolla saw something others missed. These records weren't just about disease, they were about how societies organized themselves under existential threat, how they made decisions with incomplete information, how institutions functioned when normal life collapsed. He started reading. The documents were extraordinary. Italian city-states had developed sophisticated public health systems centuries before modern medicine understood how diseases actually spread. They didn't know about bacteria or viruses. They had theories, miasmas, and bad air that were completely wrong. But their practices, quarantine, isolation, contact tracing, were remarkably effective. The first book emerged from his Curti lectures at Wisconsin in 1978. Fighting the Plague in 17th century Italy examined the institutional response to recurring epidemics. Not the medical theory, which was largely useless, but the administrative machinery that cities built to survive. Here's what made it fascinating. The Italian health boards combined legislative and executive power. They could make laws and enforce them immediately. No debate, no appeals, no delays. When plague appeared, these boards became temporary dictatorships with absolute authority over every aspect of urban life. They controlled movement. No one entered or left the city without permission. They regulated trade. Goods were quarantined, merchants detained, entire warehouses burned if contamination was suspected. They monitored households. Families with sick members were sealed inside their homes, doors nailed shut, guards posted outside. This wasn't random panic, it was systematic bureaucracy applied to crisis management. The records show careful attention to detail, standardized procedures, attempts to balance public safety against economic disruption. They knew quarantine destroyed commerce. They did it anyway. Cipolla found something else in these documents: conflict between religious and secular authority. The church insisted that faith offered protection, that religious processions and masses were necessary responses to divine punishment. Public health officials, observing that crowds spread disease, wanted to ban gatherings. The tension was explicit, documented in letters and official disputes. His next plague book went deeper into this conflict. Faith, Reason, and the Plague in 17th century Tuscany focused on a specific outbreak in Montelupo in 1630 to 1631. The records were unusually complete. He could reconstruct not just what happened, but what people were thinking, what they argued about, how they justified their decisions. The local health board wanted strict measures. The bishop wanted religious ceremonies. Both claimed to serve the public good. Both believed they were right. The documents show officials trying to navigate between epidemiological necessity and religious obligation, between empirical observation and theological certainty. What's striking is how some clergy understood the problem. Not all religious figures insisted on processions. Some argued for quarantine using theological reasoning. They claimed God expected humans to use their intelligence, that failing to take practical precautions was testing divine patience. Others disagreed violently, calling quarantine a sign of weak faith. Cipolla let the documents speak. He didn't editorialize much, didn't impose modern judgments on historical actors. He presented the arguments as they appeared in the records, showing the genuine intellectual struggle people faced when trying to reconcile religious belief with empirical observation. The plague books did something unusual. They made administrative history compelling. Public health bureaucracy shouldn't be interesting, but Cipolla found the human drama embedded in procedural documents. Life and death decisions made by committees, families separated by quarantine rules, merchants bankrupted by trade restrictions, all of it documented in careful bureaucratic prose. By the early 1990s, he'd written 6 monographs on plague and public health, medical historians recognized them as definitive. The most important overview of disease, medical theory, and public health in early modern Europe, one review said. This wasn't narrow specialist work. These books changed how historians thought about pre-modern medicine and institutional development. But while the plague books were earning academic praise, something else was happening. A small essay Cipolla had written years earlier, circulated privately among friends, was starting to escape containment. It was called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. He'd written it in 1976, originally in English, as a kind of intellectual joke, not for publication, just something amusing to share with colleagues, a satirical take on human behaviour using the language and structure of social science. The essay proposed 5 fundamental laws. First law, everyone always underestimates the number of stupid people in circulation. Second law, stupidity is distributed equally across all human categories. Education, wealth, social status, none of it protects you. Stupid people exist in every group. Third law, this one's the key. A stupid person is someone who causes harm to others while gaining nothing themselves, possibly even harming themselves in the process. That's the definition. Harm without benefits. Cipolla wasn't being mean-spirited. He was making a serious point wrapped in humour. Most bad behaviour is comprehensible. Criminals harm others but benefit themselves. That's rational, if immoral. Stupid behaviour is different. It's harm without purpose, damage without gain. Fourth law, non-stupid people always underestimate how dangerous stupid people are. They assume rational motivation. They try to predict behaviour based on self-interest. But stupid people don't follow those rules. They act in ways that hurt everyone, including themselves. Fifth law, stupid people are the most dangerous category of human being, more dangerous than criminals, who at least act predictably in pursuit of self-interest. Stupid people are unpredictable and destructive. And the essay included a graph, Cartesian coordinates with personal gain and loss on one axis, gains and losses caused to others on the other axis. 4 quadrants, intelligent people who benefit themselves and others, bandits who benefit themselves at others' expense, helpless people who harm themselves while benefiting others. And in the bottom left quadrant, stupid people who harm everyone. It was brilliant satire, funny but also genuinely insightful about human behaviour. The kind of thing that sounds like a joke but makes you think. Cipolla never intended it for wide distribution. He gave copies to friends. They gave copies to their friends. By the early 1980s, it was circulating through European universities, photocopied and passed around, an underground hit among academics. In 1988, an Italian publisher collected 2 of Cipolla's satirical essays and published them as Allegro ma non troppo. The stupidity essay was one. The other was about black pepper and medieval population growth, equally tongue-in-cheek, claiming pepper's supposed aphrodisiac properties caused demographic expansion. The book became a bestseller in Italy, then it spread. Translations appeared, first Germany, then France, then everywhere. The essay that was never meant for publication became Cipolla's most widely read work by an enormous margin. This created a strange situation. Cipolla was internationally respected for serious scholarship on monetary history, plague, and pre-industrial economics. His academic books were standard references, cited constantly, assigned in graduate seminars. But outside academia, most people who knew his name knew it because of a satirical essay about stupidity. The essay's success reveals something about how ideas travel. Serious scholarship reaches specialists. Clear, accessible writing reaches educated general readers. But humour reaches everyone. The stupidity essay was funny enough to share, insightful enough to remember, and short enough that busy people would actually read it. Cipolla understood this. He'd always valued clear writing, had always tried to make complex ideas accessible. The stupidity essay took that principle to its logical conclusion. Strip away the jargon, present the argument simply, add humour to make it memorable. But here's the tension. The essay made him famous, but for something he'd written as a lark. His real work, the scholarship he'd spent decades producing, remained largely unknown outside academic circles. This bothers some scholars. They want recognition for their serious contributions, not their entertainments. Did it bother Cipolla? Hard to say. He never complained publicly. He continued his research, continued writing serious books, treated the essay's success as an amusing footnote to a serious career. The 1980s brought recognition of a different kind. Honorary degrees, academy memberships. He joined the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, the British Academy. These weren't popular accolades. They were professional recognition from the highest levels of academic achievement. In Italy, he received the gold medal from the Ministry of Public Education in 1972. Switzerland's Federal Institute of Technology gave him an honorary doctorate in 1980. The University of Pavia's Faculty of Medicine followed in 1990. That last one is interesting. Medicine, not economics or history. Recognition for the plague work, for contributions to understanding how societies manage public health crises. He was collecting memberships in scholarly societies across Europe. The Accademia Nazionale dei Lincei, Italy's oldest and most prestigious scientific academy. The Accademia Europea, the Accademia delle Scienze in Turin, the Royal Historical Society in Britain. Each membership represented peer recognition. These weren't popularity contests. They were assessments by other scholars that Cipolla had made contributions significant enough to warrant inclusion in their institutions. His teaching career was winding down. He retired from Berkeley in 1991, though he'd effectively been semi-retired for years, spending less time in California, more in Pavia. The Transatlantic commute had worked for 3 decades, but he was approaching 70. The routine was getting harder. He kept writing, though. The mind stayed sharp, even as the body weakened. Parkinson's disease was starting to affect him, making daily tasks more difficult, but the intellectual capacity remained. In 1995 came the ultimate recognition, the International Balzan Prize for Economic History. This is one of the major prizes in the field, comparable to what the Nobel represents in other disciplines. The citation praised his innovation, his methodology, his combination of macro-historical analysis with micro-historical detail. The prize committee noted something specific. Cipolla had bridged divides between economic theory and historical narrative, between quantitative analysis and cultural interpretation, between specialized research and accessible writing. He'd shown these weren't contradictions but complementary approaches. That synthesis defined his career. He never chose between rigor and readability, between narrow expertise and broad scope, between technical precision and humanistic interpretation. He pursued all of them simultaneously, believing the best scholarship required all these elements working together. His collecting continued through these years. The homes in Berkeley and Pavia filled with objects, ancient coins, systematically organized and catalogued, old clocks, mechanical timepieces from different eras, Italian paintings from the 18th century, Roman surgical instruments, gleaming metal tools that revealed how ancient physicians understood the body. These weren't random acquisitions. Each collection connected to his research interests, the coins to monetary history, the clocks to his book on time and culture, the surgical instruments to his work on medicine and public health. Even the paintings reflected his interest in how societies represented themselves visually. The collections revealed something about his approach. History wasn't just documents and data, it was material culture, physical objects that people made and used. Understanding past economies meant understanding the actual stuff of economic life. Coins you could hold, clocks you could wind, instruments you could imagine a surgeon wielding. This materialist approach distinguished him from historians who worked purely with texts. Cipolla believed objects contained knowledge that documents couldn't capture: the weight of a coin, the precision of a clock's mechanism, the shape of a surgical tool. These taught you things about past societies that written sources alone couldn't convey. The decade wound toward its close. Cipolla was in his 70s now, health declining but mind still engaged. The Parkinson's made movement difficult, but he could still think, still write, still engage with ideas. He published his final book in 1992, Miasmas and Disease, Public Health and the Environment in the Pre-Industrial Age, the sixth and last of his monographs on epidemics and public health institutions. Medical historians would later call these 6 works the most important, accessible, and comprehensive overviews of disease, medical theory, and public health in any region of early modern Europe. That's quite a statement. The most important, the most accessible, the most comprehensive for any region in early modern Europe. Cipolla was 70 years old when this book appeared. Most academics at that age are coasting, reprinting old articles, giving the same lectures they've given for decades, enjoying emeritus status, and letting younger scholars do the heavy lifting. Not Cipolla. He was still breaking new ground, still asking questions nobody else was asking, still finding connections between environmental conditions and disease patterns that other historians had missed. The Parkinson's was getting worse though. His handwriting, always precise, was becoming shakier. Simple movements that used to be automatic now required conscious effort and concentration. Walking across a room, picking up a book, turning a page. His wife Aura was there. She'd been there through the whole Transatlantic adventure, through 30 years of splitting time between Berkeley and Pavia, through the writing and the teaching and the collecting. Now she was managing his daily care. As the disease progressed, the mind stayed sharp. That's what people who knew him in those final years always emphasized. The body was failing, but the intellect remained intact. He could still analyze, still synthesize, still see patterns and connections that others missed. He stopped traveling. The twice-yearly migration between California and Italy had defined his adult life since 1959. But by the mid-90s it was too difficult. He stayed in Pavia, the city where he was born, the city where he'd gotten his degree in 1944, the city where he'd held a chair from 1965 to 1978. Coming full circle, you could say, though that phrase makes it sound more poetic than it probably felt. When you're dealing with Parkinson's, geography matters less than whether you can hold a fork or button your shirt. His children visited. We know he had family because records mention them, though details about his personal life remain sparse. He wasn't the type to write memoirs or give interviews about his private experiences. The work was what mattered. The scholarship, the books, the ideas, the collections surrounded him. Thousands of ancient coins, each one catalogued and organised. Clocks ticking away, mechanical hearts beating out time in multiple rhythms. Italian paintings on the walls, Roman surgical instruments in display cases. 50 years of accumulated objects, each one representing some aspect of his research interests. You could reconstruct his intellectual biography from these collections. Start with the coins and you get the monetary history. Move to the clocks and you understand his interest in how societies measured and organised time. Look at the surgical instruments and you see the connection to medical history and public health. The paintings show his engagement with cultural history and visual representation. Everything connected. That was always his approach. Economics wasn't separate from culture. Technology wasn't separate from social organisation. Material objects weren't separate from human behaviour. It all formed a single, complex, interconnected system. By 1998, the disease had progressed significantly. He was 76, still mentally present but increasingly limited physically. The frustration must have been immense. Imagine having decades of knowledge and insight in your head, but struggling with the basic mechanics of communication. He died on September 5th, 2000, in Pavia, 78 years old. The cause was complications from Parkinson's disease, though at that age, after years of decline, the specific medical details matter less than the simple fact of ending. The obituaries appeared in academic journals and major newspapers. They praised his scholarship, his innovation, his ability to make economic history accessible to general readers. They mentioned the Balzan Prize, the multiple honorary doctorates, the memberships in prestigious academies. But here's what they mostly emphasized: the breadth, the range, the refusal to be limited by disciplinary boundaries or conventional approaches. Cipolla had studied monetary systems in medieval Milan, population patterns across world history, the development of guns and sailing ships, the evolution of mechanical clocks, plague outbreaks in Renaissance Italy, the role of spices in economic development, and of course, the basic laws of human stupidity. That's not a normal career trajectory. Most scholars find a niche and dig deep. Cipolla dug deep in multiple niches simultaneously, and he kept finding ways to connect them. Think about the range of sources he used: archival documents from Italian city-states, statistical data on population and prices, archaeological evidence about technology, literary sources describing social practices, physical artifacts like coins and clocks. Each type of source required different skills. Reading medieval Latin documents demands paleographic training. Analyzing statistical series requires mathematical sophistication. Interpreting archaeological finds needs material culture expertise. Understanding literary sources involves careful contextual reading. Cipolla had all these skills, or he developed them as needed, because he followed questions wherever they led, regardless of whether the answers required crossing into another discipline's territory. The Economic History Review published a memorial tribute. So did the Journal of European Economic History. Colleagues shared memories of working with him, learning from him, debating with him. A common theme emerged. People remembered his generosity, his willingness to help younger scholars, his enthusiasm for good work regardless of who produced it. No gatekeeping, no territorial defensiveness, just genuine excitement about ideas and research. This matters because academia can be viciously competitive. People protect their turf. They dismiss work that uses different methods or challenges their conclusions. They form schools and camps and engage in decades-long scholarly feuds. Cipolla seems to have avoided most of that, not because he was soft or uncommitted to his positions, but because he was genuinely interested in understanding how things worked rather than in being right or defending territory. His influence extended through multiple channels: the direct scholarly impact through his books and articles, the institutional impact through his teaching at Berkeley and Italian universities, the methodological impact through his demonstration of how to combine different approaches, and the broader cultural impact through works like The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. That last one is interesting because it operated on a completely different level from his academic work. The stupidity essay wasn't peer-reviewed scholarship. It wasn't building on previous research or advancing new theoretical frameworks. It was social commentary dressed up as pseudo-scientific analysis. But it worked. It resonated with people because it captured something true about human behavior. The observation that stupid people are more dangerous than malicious people because their actions can't be predicted or rationalized. The insight that stupidity is democratically distributed across all social categories. The recognition that we consistently underestimate how much damage stupid people can cause. You could argue this diminished his serious scholarly reputation, that a distinguished economic historian shouldn't be writing tongue-in-cheek essays about stupidity, that it was beneath his dignity or academic standing. Except Cipolla never seemed to think that way. He had serious work and lighter work, but he didn't apologize for either. The plague studies were rigorous scholarship. The stupidity essay was witty social observation. Both came from the same mind, the same curiosity about human behavior. This connects to something larger about how he approached his field. Economic history, as traditionally practiced, focused on big quantitative patterns, production levels, trade volumes, price indices, population figures, the kind of data you could put in tables and graphs. Cipolla did that work. His early publications on monetary movements were full of numbers and statistical analysis. But he never stopped there. He always asked what the numbers meant for actual people living actual lives. When he studied plague in 17th century Italy, he didn't just calculate mortality rates. He looked at how people responded, how officials tried to manage the crisis, how religious and secular authorities clashed over appropriate policies, how families dealt with loss, how communities fractured or came together. The numbers told you something, but the human responses told you more. His book on clocks wasn't just about technical improvements in timekeeping. It was about how mechanical time changed social relationships, how it enabled new forms of work coordination, how it altered people's daily rhythms, how it reflected and reinforced broader cultural shifts toward measurement and quantification. Technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It shapes society, and society shapes it. Cipolla understood this instinctively, decades before historians of technology made it their central insight. The collections he accumulated reflected this same sensibility. A coin isn't just a monetary unit with a particular gold or silver content. It's an object that people held, exchanged, hoarded, melted down. It bears marks of use and circulation. It carries inscriptions that proclaim political authority. It represents decisions about what to produce, how to value it, how to regulate its use. Holding a coin, you're holding a piece of economic history, but you're also holding political history, cultural history, artistic history, metallurgical history. Everything connects. This is what made his work so influential. Not just the specific findings about monetary policy in Milan or plague responses in Tuscany, but the demonstration that economic history could be rigorous and humanistic simultaneously. That you could count things without reducing humans to numbers. That you could use statistics without losing sight of the people the statistics described. His students carried this forward. The scholars he trained at Berkeley and in Italy absorbed his methods and approaches. They went on to do their own research, applying his combination of quantitative precision and cultural sensitivity to new topics and periods. The institutional legacy mattered too. His long tenure at Berkeley helped establish economic history as a legitimate field in American universities. Before mid-century, it was often seen as a European specialty, something Germans and French did, but Americans found less compelling. Cipolla's presence at Berkeley, his publications in English, his engagement with American scholarly debates, all helped legitimize the field in the US context. He showed American historians that economic history wasn't just about dusty archives and obscure monetary policies. It was about understanding how societies functioned, how people made decisions, how institutions evolved. The translations of his work amplified this impact. When your books appear in 13 languages, you're reaching audiences far beyond the specialist academic community. Students in Tokyo and São Paulo and Copenhagen were reading his work, absorbing his methods, learning his approaches. Global influence through a combination of rigorous scholarship and accessible writing. That's increasingly rare in academia, where specialization and jargon often make even important work inaccessible to anyone outside a narrow subfield. Cipolla managed to be both specialist and generalist, expert in specific topics, but able to communicate findings to broader audiences. Technically sophisticated, but never obscure for the sake of appearing sophisticated. The year 2000 ended a life, but not a legacy. His books remained in print. Libraries held his collected works. Scholars continued citing his research. Students kept reading his analyses of pre-industrial European economy. And people kept sharing that essay about stupidity, photocopied, emailed, posted online when the internet made that possible, translated informally into dozens of languages, quoted at dinner parties and in corporate boardrooms and on social media. Which brings us to the question this whole story has been building toward. Why does any of this matter now, more than 2 decades after his death? The stupidity essay matters because Cipolla accidentally created something that explains our current moment better than most contemporary analysis. Look around. Every organization you know is dealing with decisions that hurt everyone involved, made by people who seem to gain nothing from making them. Every institution faces actors whose behavior can't be explained by self-interest or malice. Standard frameworks for understanding human behavior assume rationality, or at least comprehensible motivation. Cipolla's framework doesn't. Who implements policies that harm their constituents and guarantee their own defeat? The investor who loses money while ensuring everyone else loses more. These aren't bandits pursuing self-interest. They're not helpless people sacrificing themselves for others. They're the stupid actors in Cipolla's taxonomy, and they're everywhere. The graph he created divided human actions into 4 quadrants based on 2 axes: benefit or harm to oneself on one axis, benefit or harm to others on the other. 4 resulting categories. Intelligent people benefit themselves and others. Bandits benefit themselves at others' expense. Helpless people harm themselves while benefiting others. And stupid people harm both themselves and everyone else. Most analytical frameworks can handle the first 3 categories. Self-interested actors. Makes sense. We understand why someone would steal if they profit from it. We understand why someone might sacrifice their own interests for a cause they believe in. What we struggle with is the 4th category. Actions that produce no winners. Decisions that hurt the decision maker as much as anyone else. Traditional economics assumes rational actors optimizing outcomes. Political science assumes actors pursuing power or ideology. Sociology assumes actors responding to social forces and incentives. None of these frameworks adequately explain the stupid actor who optimizes nothing, pursues nothing coherent, and responds to no discernible incentive structure. Cipolla's insight was recognizing this category as fundamental rather than exceptional. Not an occasional aberration, but a constant presence in human affairs. The first law states that we always underestimate how many stupid people exist. Always. No matter how cynical you think you are, you're still underestimating. This matters practically. Organizations make decisions assuming rational opposition. If we propose policy X, our opponents will counter with policy Y to advance their interests. Strategic planning depends on modeling other actors as pursuing comprehensible goals through logical means. But stupid actors break these models. They don't respond to incentives. They don't maximize anything. They just create damage unpredictably. The second law states that stupidity distributes equally across all human categories. Education doesn't protect you. Wealth doesn't protect you. Professional success doesn't protect you. A stupid person with a PhD is still stupid. A stupid person with $1 billion is still stupid. The credentials and achievements don't matter. The category transcends them. This directly contradicts how institutions function. We assume competence correlates with credentials. We grant authority based on education and experience. We trust experts in their domains. Cipolla says this trust is systematically misplaced because stupidity appears at equal rates among experts and non-experts, educated and uneducated, successful and unsuccessful. Think about the implications. Any group of 100 people contains the same proportion of stupid actors regardless of how carefully you selected them. Your board of directors, your academic department, your government cabinet. The selection process that got them there filtered for many things, but it didn't filter out stupidity because stupidity doesn't correlate with any of the traits you selected for. The fourth law explains why this matters so much. Non-stupid people always underestimate the damaging power of stupid individuals. We assume that someone in a position of authority must have some comprehensible motivation. We search for the hidden agenda, the secret benefit they're pursuing. We can't accept that they're simply creating damage without purpose. This search for hidden rationality is itself damaging. It wastes time and energy. It leads to conspiracy theories that are actually less disturbing than the truth. Conspiracies at least involve competent actors pursuing goals. The alternative is that important decisions are being made by people who aren't pursuing goals at all, just creating destruction randomly. Organizations spend enormous resources trying to predict and counter opposition. What if the opposition isn't strategic? What if the person blocking your proposal isn't pursuing their own agenda, but simply generating obstacles reflexively? Your strategic planning is useless. Your negotiation tactics are irrelevant. You're playing chess against someone who's eating the pieces. The fifth law declares stupid people the most dangerous category. More dangerous than bandits because bandits are predictable. A thief wants your money. You can defend against that. You can negotiate. You can find mutually beneficial arrangements. With stupid actors, there's no arrangement that works. They harm you, and they harm themselves in the process. There's no resolution because there's no goal being pursued. This framework explains phenomena that otherwise seem inexplicable. Why do some organizations collapse despite no one benefiting from the collapse? Stupid actors in key positions. Why do some policies persist despite harming everyone, including their advocates? Stupid actors controlling implementation. Why do some conflicts escalate beyond any possible gain for any party? Stupid actors driving the escalation. The current information environment amplifies stupid actors' impact. Previously, damage required proximity. A stupid person could harm those immediately around them, but not distant strangers. Now, anyone with internet access can cause global damage. A single stupid actor can spread misinformation to millions, can trigger cascading failures across interconnected systems, can amplify conflicts until they become unmanageable. Social media platforms optimize for engagement, not intelligence. Stupid actions often generate more engagement than intelligent ones. Outrage spreads faster than reason. Destructive behavior attracts more attention than constructive behavior. The algorithms reward stupid actors by giving them larger audiences and greater influence. This creates a selection effect. Stupid actors gain prominence, not despite their stupidity, but because of it. Their willingness to create damage without concern for consequences makes them more visible, more memorable, more influential. They rise to positions where they can cause maximum harm. Traditional gatekeeping mechanisms assume that achieving prominence required some combination of intelligence and banditry. You needed to be smart enough to navigate institutions or ruthless enough to climb over others. Stupid actors couldn't reach positions of significant influence. The internet eliminated that assumption. Prominence now requires only the ability to generate attention, and stupid actions generate attention effectively. Cipolla wrote his essay before social media, before viral content, before algorithmic amplification. But his framework predicts exactly what we're seeing. Give stupid actors a megaphone, and they'll use it to cause damage at scale. No conspiracy required, no hidden agenda, just the natural operation of the laws he identified. The essay went viral, ironically enough, because it explained virality. People shared it because it named something they were experiencing, but couldn't articulate. The sense that events weren't driven by rational actors, pursuing comprehensible goals. That damage was occurring randomly, purposelessly, unstoppably. Academic historians read Cipolla's serious work. General audiences read his stupidity essay. The serious work required expertise to appreciate. The stupidity essay required only the experience of living in a world where nothing makes sense. That's a universal experience now. Every major institution faces this problem. Corporations dealing with activists who hurt both the company and their own cause. Governments dealing with voters who support policies that harm them. Universities dealing with controversies where all sides lose. None of the traditional frameworks explain these situations adequately. Cipolla's framework does. It says stop looking for the hidden rationality. Stop assuming there must be some benefit someone's pursuing. Some actions are just stupid. They harm everyone involved. They serve no purpose. They follow no logic, and they're far more common than you think. This is uncomfortable. We want to believe the world is comprehensible, that events have causes we can understand and counter, that if we're smart enough, strategic enough, careful enough, we can navigate successfully. Cipolla says that's false comfort. Stupid actors exist. They're numerous. They're dangerous. And you can't predict or prevent their damage because it follows no pattern. The only defense is recognition. Knowing that stupid actors exist and accepting that their behavior won't make sense. Stop wasting energy trying to understand the incomprehensible. Stop assuming strategic opposition where there's only reflexive destruction. Stop negotiating with people who aren't pursuing outcomes. This applies personally too. Everyone has encountered the colleague who torpedoes projects, including their own. The family member who creates conflicts that hurt everyone. The neighbor who complains about problems while preventing solutions. We search for their motivation. What do they really want? What would satisfy them? Cipolla says they don't want anything. They're not pursuing satisfaction. They're stupid actors generating damage. Recognizing this doesn't solve the problem, but it stops you from making it worse by engaging as if they were rational opponents. Organizations that understand this can adapt. Stop promoting people based solely on credentials. Intelligence and competence don't correlate with stupidity's absence. Create systems that limit damage from any single actor. Assume some decision makers will be stupid and design around that assumption. Monitor outcomes more than intentions. Most institutions do the opposite. They assume good faith. They trust credentialed experts. They give authority based on position. They focus on intentions rather than results. This leaves them vulnerable to stupid actors who cause damage regardless of authority, credentials, or stated intentions. The essay's continued relevance stems from this practical applicability. It's not just an amusing observation, it's a functional framework for understanding otherwise inexplicable behavior. That makes it more useful than most contemporary social science, which still assumes rationality as a baseline. Cipolla's serious historical work will continue being read by specialists. His plague studies inform current epidemiology. His monetary analyses influence economic history. His work on technological change shapes how historians understand innovation. These contributions matter academically, but the stupidity essay matters culturally. It's become part of how people think about human behavior. It's created vocabulary for discussing the incomprehensible. It's provided a framework that works when others fail. That's the strange dual legacy. Scholar of medieval European economy, author of the most useful framework for understanding modern social dysfunction. Both true simultaneously, both important, neither diminishing the other. Cipolla died in 2000, but his ideas gained momentum after his death. The stupidity essay spread through business schools, government agencies, tech companies, not as official curriculum, as underground knowledge. The thing people forwarded to colleagues with, "This explains everything," in the subject line. Silicon Valley embraced it first. Engineers recognized the pattern immediately. They'd watched brilliant technical teams destroyed by one person who couldn't code but wouldn't admit it. Startups imploding because a founder with an MBA insisted on strategies that damaged the company while enriching nobody. Meetings where the least informed person talked the most and everyone else just gave up. The essay provided language for something they'd experienced but couldn't articulate. Stupid actors aren't incompetent. Incompetent people fail in predictable ways. They make mistakes you can anticipate and prevent. Stupid actors succeed at causing damage while failing at everything else. That's much harder to defend against. Corporate consultants started citing the framework without attribution. The 4-quadrant graph showed up in PowerPoint presentations about organizational behavior. Nobody mentioned Cipolla. They just used his categories as if they were common knowledge. Intelligent actors, bandits, helpless people. And the 4th quadrant, everyone wanted to avoid acknowledging existed. Academic economists mostly ignored it. Too unserious, too anecdotal, based on observation rather than formal models. But practitioners found it more useful than most economic theory, because it explained outcomes that rational choice models couldn't. The deals that made everyone worse off, the policies that hurt their own supporters, the reforms that damaged what they claimed to protect. Political scientists discovered it during the 2000s. Suddenly, they had a framework for understanding seemingly inexplicable political movements. Groups that demanded policies actively harmful to their own stated interests. Politicians who destroyed their own coalitions while attacking opponents. Activists who undermined their causes through tactics that alienated potential allies. Traditional analysis assumed hidden rationality. These actors must be pursuing something we don't understand. Some benefit we're not seeing. Some strategy that makes sense from their perspective. Cipolla said no. Sometimes there's no hidden rationality. Sometimes actions are just stupid. They harm everyone, including the actor. They serve no purpose. They follow no logic. This was liberating for analysts stuck trying to explain the incomprehensible. Stop searching for the strategy that isn't there. Stop assuming sophisticated game theory behind obviously destructive behavior. Accept that stupid actors exist and act accordingly. The framework spread to management theory. Books about organizational behavior started incorporating the ideas without citation. How to identify stupid actors before they reach positions of authority. How to structure organizations so individual stupidity causes minimal damage. How to distinguish between stupid actors and merely incompetent ones. The distinction matters operationally. Incompetent people can learn. You train them or reassign them. Stupid actors can't be trained because they're not pursuing goals that training could help achieve. They're not trying to succeed and failing. They're succeeding at causing damage. That's completely different. Military strategists found applications. Wargaming had always assumed rational opponents pursuing comprehensible objectives. But real conflicts increasingly involved actors who seemed to pursue mutual destruction. Cipolla's framework explained this. Not every opponent is a rational bandit seeking advantage. Some are stupid actors generating damage for no gain. This changed strategic planning. You can negotiate with bandits. You can't negotiate with stupid actors because they're not pursuing outcomes you could offer. You can deter bandits by making their goals more expensive. You can't deter stupid actors because they're not calculating costs and benefits. They're just causing damage. Medical administrators discovered the essay during the pandemic. Suddenly they were dealing with situations that made no sense through normal models. People refusing treatments that could save them while demanding treatments that couldn't. Politicians blocking policies that would help their constituents while promoting policies that wouldn't. Media coverage that made everyone less informed rather than more. The stupidity framework explained this better than anything else. Not everyone is a rational actor pursuing health or information. Some are stupid actors causing damage to themselves and others. Recognizing this doesn't solve the problem, but it stops you from wasting resources on strategies designed for rational opponents. Educational institutions started teaching it informally. Professors forwarded the essay to graduate students dealing with committee dysfunction. Administrators shared it when trying to explain why certain initiatives failed despite everyone's stated support. It became secret knowledge, the thing experienced people understood but couldn't say officially. Because explicitly calling someone stupid violates professional norms. You're supposed to assume good faith. You're supposed to find the underlying rationality. You're supposed to believe everyone's pursuing reasonable goals through flawed execution. Cipolla said that's often false. Some people aren't pursuing reasonable goals through flawed execution. They're pursuing no goals through perfect execution of damage. The essay's influence on risk management was particularly significant. Traditional risk analysis assumes actors pursue their interests predictably. You can model their behavior, you can anticipate their moves, you can prepare countermeasures. But stupid actors don't pursue interests predictably. They cause damage unpredictably. That requires different preparation. Insurance companies started incorporating stupidity as a category of risk. Not officially. They couldn't write policies explicitly covering losses caused by stupid actors. Why? But they adjusted their models to account for damage that follows no rational pattern. That serves no one's interests. That emerges from behavior that harms everyone, including the actor. Financial regulators found the framework useful for understanding market disruptions. Most crises follow comprehensible patterns. Bubbles form when people rationally pursue gains and ignore risks. Crashes happen when people rationally pursue safety simultaneously. These are predictable. You can model them, you can design regulations, but some disruptions don't follow these patterns. They result from actions that harm everyone, including those taking them. Traders who destroyed their own firms while enriching nobody. Executives who bankrupted their companies while gaining nothing. Investors who lost money pursuing strategies that couldn't possibly work. Cipolla's framework explained this better than models assuming rationality. Tech platforms confronted the stupidity problem with content moderation. Most bad actors are bandits. They pursue gains through behavior that harms others. You can deter this by changing incentives. Make bad behavior unprofitable, and bandits stop. But some bad actors are stupid. They harm others while harming themselves. They pursue no gain. Changing incentives doesn't affect them. This required different moderation strategies. You can't negotiate with stupid actors. You can't modify their incentives. You can only limit their reach. Platforms that understood this developed better policies than platforms that assumed all bad actors were rational bandits, seeking advantage. The framework influenced how organizations think about hiring. Traditional hiring assumes competence is the main variable. Hire competent people, and they'll pursue organizational goals effectively. But competence and stupidity are independent variables. You can hire very competent people who are also stupid actors. They'll competently cause damage. This led to new screening approaches. Don't just evaluate technical skills, evaluate whether candidates have a history of causing damage while gaining nothing. Do they leave previous organizations worse off without benefiting? Do they create conflicts that harm everyone, including themselves? These are warning signs independent of competence. Venture capitalists started using the framework for founder evaluation. Most failed startups fail rationally. The market didn't want the product. The timing was wrong. The execution had flaws. These are comprehensible failures, but some startups fail stupidly. The founder made decisions that harmed the company while benefiting nobody, including the founder. That's different. That's a stupid actor, and it's much harder to fix. The essay also influenced negotiation theory. Traditional negotiation assumes parties pursue their interests. Find overlapping interests, and you reach agreement. But what if one party isn't pursuing interests? What if they're a stupid actor causing damage while gaining nothing? Then traditional negotiation fails. You can't find overlapping interests with someone who has no interests, only destructive impulses. Experienced negotiators learn to identify this early. Does the other party make demands that would harm them if met? Do they reject offers that would benefit everyone? Do they pursue positions that damage their stated goals? These suggest a stupid actor, and if you're negotiating with a stupid actor, you need a completely different strategy, or you need to stop negotiating. Trying to force changes, the legal profession found applications in jury selection and judicial behaviour. Most lawyers assume jurors pursue justice, or at least some comprehensible goal, but Cipolla's framework suggests some jurors are stupid actors. They'll make decisions that harm everyone, including themselves. They'll reject evidence that serves their interests. They'll pursue verdicts that satisfy nobody. Identifying potential stupid actors during voir dire became a priority. Not incompetent jurors, those you can work with. Stupid jurors, those who'll cause damage regardless of evidence or argument. The distinction matters because your strategy must change completely if you're presenting to stupid actors. Diplomatic Corps integrated the framework into their understanding of international relations. Traditional diplomacy assumes nations pursue national interests rationally, but Cipolla suggests some leaders are stupid actors. They make decisions that harm their nations while benefiting nobody, including themselves. You can't negotiate with them as if they were rational bandits pursuing advantage. They're not, they're pursuing damage. This explained otherwise incomprehensible international situations. Leaders who destroyed their economies while enriching nobody, governments that alienated allies while gaining no new partnerships, policies that damaged everyone, involved including those implementing them. These weren't sophisticated strategies, they were stupid actions. Recognizing this changed how diplomats approach these situations. The framework's influence extended to media analysis. Traditional media criticism assumes bias serves someone's interests. Networks favor certain narratives because it benefits their owners, or advertisers, or audience. But Cipolla suggests some media behavior is just stupid. It harms the network's reputation. It alienates their audience. It enriches nobody. It's not strategic bias. It's stupid coverage that damages everyone, including those producing it. Understanding this distinction improved media literacy. Not all bad coverage serves hidden interests. Some just reflect stupid actors in editorial positions making decisions that harm everyone, including themselves. You can't fix this by exposing the bias because there's no bias to expose. There's only stupidity, and stupidity doesn't respond to exposure. The essay influenced how people think about social movements. Traditional analysis assumes movements pursue their stated goals strategically, but Cipolla's framework explains movements that seem to undermine their own objectives. Activists who alienate potential supporters, organizers who create conflicts within their coalitions, spokespeople who make their causes less popular through their advocacy. These aren't strategic failures, they're stupid actions. The actors aren't pursuing the movement's goals ineffectively. They're not pursuing the movement's goals at all. They're causing damage while benefiting nobody, including themselves. Recognizing this helps movements protect themselves. Not everyone claiming to support your cause actually does. Some are stupid actors who'll damage it. Corporate boards started considering stupidity as a distinct risk category. Not incompetence, not malice, stupidity. Directors who make decisions that harm shareholders while enriching nobody, including themselves. Executives who destroy value while gaining nothing. Strategies that damage the company while serving no competing interest. This risk can't be managed through traditional governance. You can align incentives against bandits, you can train against incompetence, but you can't align incentives or train against stupidity. You can only try to prevent stupid actors from reaching positions where they can cause significant damage. That requires different screening, different promotion criteria, different board composition. Public health officials applied the framework during health crises. Not everyone resisting public health measures is a rational actor pursuing liberty or economic interests. Some are stupid actors. They harm public health while gaining no liberty or economic benefit. They harm themselves while harming others. Traditional public health communication targets rational actors. It provides information to help people make better decisions. But information doesn't affect stupid actors. They're not making bad decisions due to lack of information. They're making decisions that harm everyone for no reason. This required different public health strategies. Stop wasting resources on communication designed for rational actors when dealing with stupid actors. Focus instead on limiting their ability to cause damage. Policies that work despite their behavior rather than by changing their behavior. The framework became essential for understanding institutional dysfunction. Most institutions fail for comprehensible reasons. Insufficient resources, poor leadership, external pressures. These are problems you can address, but some institutions fail because they're dominated by stupid actors. People making decisions that harm the institution while benefiting nobody, including themselves. These institutional failures look different. Resources aren't the problem. Leadership understands the issues. External pressures aren't unusual. Yet the institution still fails because key actors keep making decisions that damage everyone, including themselves. And they're not pursuing hidden agendas. They're not secretly benefiting. They're just causing damage. Recognizing this pattern helps prevent wasted reform efforts. You can't fix an institution dominated by stupid actors through better funding or clearer goals or improved incentives. Those assume rational actors pursuing comprehensible objectives. Stupid actors don't respond to any of those interventions. You have to remove them. There's no other solution. If the core issue isn't process, or communication or incentives. What if it's that key decision makers are causing damage while gaining nothing? You can't consult your way out of that. The institution needs different people, not different procedures. Military strategists recognize patterns in catastrophic defeats that standard analysis couldn't explain. Commanders making decisions that endangered their forces while serving no tactical or strategic purpose. Not incompetence, because these were experienced officers. Not treachery because they gained nothing from the outcomes. Just pure destruction for its own sake. Traditional military analysis assumes rational actors. Even bad commanders are trying to achieve something. Win glory, avoid blame, protect their units. Their decisions make sense within some framework of goals, but stupid actors don't have frameworks. They're not pursuing misguided objectives. They're not pursuing objectives at all. This explained military disasters where the pattern of decisions seemed random. Because it was random. There was no underlying logic to discover, no strategic insight to extract. The only lesson was recognizing the pattern early and removing the commander before catastrophic damage occurred. Economists studying market crashes found similar dynamics. Not every crash results from rational actors pursuing their interests. Some crashes involve actors making decisions that destroy value while enriching nobody, not even themselves. These crashes look different. Traditional crashes follow comprehensible patterns, bubbles inflated by rational actors expecting to sell to greater fools, panics driven by rational actors protecting their assets, manipulations executed by actors extracting wealth. But some crashes just happen. Actors make decisions that harm everyone for no reason. They destroy their own wealth along with everyone else's, and they're not mentally ill or irrational in a clinical sense. They're just stupid. The framework explained why some crashes resist prevention. You can regulate against manipulation. You can manage against panic. You can educate against bubbles, but you can't regulate or manage or educate against stupidity. Legal systems started grappling with the implications. Criminal law assumes rational actors. Even the insanity defense assumes some kind of logic, however distorted. People act for reasons. But what about defendants whose actions harmed everyone, including themselves, for no reason? Not insanity, not passion, not greed, just damage. Traditional sentencing frameworks don't handle this well. You can't deter someone who wasn't pursuing goals. You can't rehabilitate someone who wasn't acting from comprehensible motives. You can only incapacitate them to prevent future damage. This created uncomfortable questions about punishment and justice. If someone causes massive harm while gaining nothing and potentially harming themselves, what's the appropriate response? The answer depends on whether you view punishment as retributive or preventive. If retributive, the harm caused determines the punishment regardless of motive. If preventive, you're just trying to stop future harm. Cipolla's framework pushed toward the preventive view. Because stupid actors can't be deterred or reformed, only prevented from causing damage. Educational institutions discovered they couldn't identify stupid actors through traditional admissions processes. Standardized tests measure certain abilities. Grades measure others. Recommendations measure still others. But none of them measure the propensity to cause damage while gaining nothing. This explained some spectacular institutional failures. Students or faculty who damage their institutions while benefiting nobody, including themselves. Not rebels with causes, not critics with agendas, just damage causers with no apparent purpose. Universities couldn't screen for this because it's orthogonal to academic ability. You can be brilliant and stupid. The intelligence that earns perfect scores and the stupidity that causes institutional damage can coexist in the same person. This realization challenged fundamental assumptions about meritocracy. If merit-based selection can't screen out stupid actors, and stupid actors cause more damage than incompetent ones, maybe pure meritocracy isn't optimal for institutional health. You need additional criteria beyond demonstrated ability. Some measure of whether applicants cause damage while gaining nothing, but that's nearly impossible to assess before someone has power. Technology companies confronted this in hiring. Traditional interviews test for intelligence and skill, but they don't test for stupidity in Cipolla's sense. You can hire someone brilliant who then makes decisions that harm the company while benefiting nobody, including themselves. These aren't the brilliant jerks who create toxic cultures while shipping products. Those are bandits, comprehensible actors pursuing their interests at others' expense. You can manage bandits through incentives and oversight. Stupid actors are different. They damage the company and gain nothing. They sabotage projects with no competing agenda. They create problems that harm everyone, including themselves, and they're not doing it deliberately. They just keep making decisions that cause damage. Silicon Valley developed informal recognition of this pattern. Certain types of hires would reliably cause problems nobody benefited from. Not malicious, not incompetent exactly, just consistently destructive, while gaining nothing from the destruction. The industry's solution was careful reference checking focused on specific patterns. Not were they good at their job, but did they cause unexplained damage? Because stupid actors leave trails of damage that benefits nobody. Cipolla himself never pursued these applications systematically. The essay remained a diversion from his serious work, but its influence grew precisely because he'd identified something real that other frameworks missed. The essay's continued relevance stems from its explanatory power. Once you understand the framework, you see the pattern everywhere. Decisions that harm everyone for no reason. Actors causing damage while gaining nothing. Situations where traditional analysis fails because it assumes comprehensible motives. And you realize how much effort gets wasted trying to understand or fix situations that can't be understood or fixed. Because there's no underlying logic to discover, just stupidity causing damage for no reason. That's the essay's dark insight. Some problems can't be solved. Some actors can't be reasoned with or incentivized or educated. They just cause damage, and the only solution is preventing them from having the power to cause it. This contradicts the Enlightenment assumption that problems yield to analysis and rational intervention. Some don't. Some problems exist because stupid actors keep creating them, and stupid actors don't respond to rational intervention. The framework also explained why stupid actors often rise to positions of power despite causing visible damage, because non-stupid people consistently underestimate them. We assume everyone is pursuing some goal, even if we can't immediately identify it. We look for hidden motives and complex strategies. But sometimes there are no hidden motives. Sometimes people really are just causing damage for no reason. And while we're analysing their possible strategies, they're accumulating power and causing more damage. Cipolla wrote the essay in the 1970s, but its influence peaked decades later. The internet age created new platforms for stupid actors to cause unprecedented damage while gaining nothing. Social media gave everyone a megaphone, and some people use that megaphone exclusively to cause damage while benefiting nobody, including themselves. Traditional content moderation assumes rational actors, ban the malicious, educate the misguided. But what about actors who just cause damage? They're not promoting ideologies or seeking attention or making money. They just damage things. Platforms struggled with this because their frameworks assumed comprehensible motives. But Cipolla's model explained the behavior better. These were stupid actors causing damage while gaining nothing, and they wouldn't respond to education or incentives or community guidelines. The only solution was removing their ability to cause damage, not through punishment or reform, but through simple prevention. Carlo Cipolla died in 2000, largely unknown outside academic circles despite his substantial contributions to economic history. His books on monetary systems and plague response were respected, but specialized. His essay on stupidity became his most influential work, though he never intended it as serious scholarship. But we lack frameworks for understanding it because our analytical tools assume rational actors pursuing goals. Cipolla provided that framework, not through complex theory or extensive research, but through 5 simple laws that captured something true about human behavior. The framework's power lies in its simplicity and completeness. You don't need additional variables or qualifications. The 5 laws explain the phenomenon fully, and once you understand them, you can't unsee the pattern. That's why a humorous essay by an economic historian became unexpectedly influential across fields he never studied, because he'd identified a universal pattern that existing frameworks missed, and he'd done it with clarity and precision that made the pattern immediately recognizable. The essay's legacy isn't academic citations or theoretical refinements. It's changed how people think about a category of behavior that previously defied analysis. When you encounter someone causing damage while gaining nothing, you now have a framework for understanding what's happening. You're not dealing with a bandit pursuing hidden interests. You're not dealing with an incompetent person trying their best. You're dealing with a stupid actor, and that requires different responses. The framework doesn't make the problem solvable. Stupid actors remain dangerous and unpredictable, but at least now you can recognize them for what they are, rather than wasting effort trying to understand motives that don't exist. That recognition itself has value. It prevents the mistakes non-stupid people make when dealing with stupid actors. The assumption of hidden rationality, the search for comprehensible motives, the belief that explanation or incentives will change behavior. None of those work, because there's nothing to explain, no motives to understand, no behavior to modify through incentives. There's only damage, caused for no reason, benefiting nobody. Cipolla's 5 laws articulate this with uncomfortable precision, and that precision is why his humorous essay on stupidity outlasted his serious scholarship on economic history, because it solved a problem other frameworks couldn't address. How do you analyze behavior that serves no purpose? How do you predict actions that benefit nobody? How do you prevent damage that emerges for no reason? The answer is you recognize stupid actors early, limit their power, and stop expecting rational explanations for irrational damage. That's not satisfying, but it's true. And sometimes truth is more valuable than satisfaction. Carlo Maria Cipolla spent 50 years studying how societies actually functioned, how money moved through medieval economies, how cities managed plague outbreaks, how technology enabled empire. He wrote 21 books, trained hundreds of scholars, revolutionized economic history as a discipline. That work earned him every major prize in his field, memberships in the most prestigious academies, recognition as one of the 20th century's leading historians. None of it made him famous. What made him famous was a joke, 40 pages about stupidity that he wrote for friends, never intending publication, treating as a diversion from serious scholarship. The essay spread anyway, translated into dozens of languages, photocopied and forwarded and quoted, reaching audiences he never imagined. This creates a strange situation. Cipolla's actual legacy, the scholarship that transformed how historians understand pre-industrial Europe, remains known primarily to specialists. His accidental legacy, the stupidity framework, has influenced how millions of people think about human behavior. Most scholars would find this frustrating. Decades of rigorous research overshadowed by a satirical essay, recognition for the wrong thing, fame that came from entertainment rather than scholarship. But maybe Cipolla understood something his academic colleagues didn't. The stupidity essay succeeded precisely because it wasn't trying to be academic. It identified a real pattern using clear language accessible to anyone. No jargon, no hedging, no elaborate theoretical apparatus. Just 5 laws that captured something true about how people actually behave. The serious scholarship required years of archival research. The stupidity essay required decades of observing human behavior across centuries and cultures. Both drew on the same source, a historian's careful attention to patterns in how people make decisions. The medieval Florentines debasing their currency while destroying their own economy. The Renaissance health officials implementing quarantines while religious authorities demanded processions that spread disease. The merchants undermining trade networks that benefited them. Cipolla had spent his career documenting decisions that made no rational sense. That harmed everyone, including those making them. The stupidity essay distilled those observations into a framework, and the framework worked because Cipolla had tested it against centuries of evidence, even if he presented it as humour. This explains why the essay has lasted. It's not just clever, it's accurate. The pattern it describes appears everywhere because it's describing something fundamental about human behaviour that other frameworks miss. Traditional analysis assumes rationality or at least comprehensible motivation. Economics assumes actors maximise utility. Political science assumes actors pursue power. Sociology assumes actors respond to social forces. But none of these explain actors who maximise nothing, pursue nothing, respond to nothing, who just cause damage while gaining nothing. Cipolla's framework accounts for them, not through elaborate theory but through simple observation. These actors exist, they're numerous, they're dangerous, and they don't respond to the tools we use for managing rational actors. That insight has proven more useful than most contemporary social science, because it explains outcomes that rational choice models can't, the decisions that harm everyone, the policies that benefit nobody, the conflicts where all sides lose. His serious scholarship will endure in its domain. Economic historians will keep citing his work on monetary systems and technological change. Medical historians will keep referencing his plague studies. The books will remain important within those fields. But the stupidity essay has already transcended its origins. It's not Cipolla's essay anymore. It's become part of how people think, a framework so widely adopted that many who use it don't know where it came from. That's the paradox. The work Cipolla intended as his legacy matters to specialists. The work he wrote as a joke matters to everyone else. And both are legitimate contributions, just to different audiences. The scholar who spent decades reconstructing how medieval economies functioned ended up explaining how modern institutions fail. The historian who analysed Renaissance plague responses provided tools for understanding contemporary crisis management. The expert on technological innovation identified why some innovations, like organisational stupidity, persist despite causing universal damage. He died in 2000, watching his body fail while his mind stayed sharp. Parkinson's taking away movement, but not thought. The collections he'd built surrounded him. Ancient coins, mechanical clocks, Italian paintings, Roman surgical instruments, physical artifacts from the past he'd spent his life studying. Those objects represented his serious work. The monetary history, the cultural analysis, the material approach to understanding how societies organized themselves. That work was complete, published, preserved in libraries and courses and citations. But the essay kept spreading, downloaded and forwarded and quoted, applied to problems Cipolla never considered, used by people who'd never heard of his other work, taking on a life independent of its author. 24 years after his death, we're still dealing with the problems he identified. Organizations still struggle with actors who cause damage while gaining nothing. Institutions still fail because stupid actors reach positions of power. Analysts still waste effort looking for rational explanations for irrational behavior. The framework matters because the problem persists. And it persists because, as Cipolla's first law states, we always underestimate how many stupid people exist. No matter how cynical we think we are, no matter how much experience we accumulate, we keep underestimating. That's the essay's final insight. Recognizing the pattern doesn't make you immune to it. Understanding stupid actors doesn't prevent them from causing damage. The framework helps you avoid some mistakes, but it doesn't solve the problem. Because the problem can't be solved. Stupid actors are a permanent feature of human society. They distribute equally across all categories. They don't respond to incentives or education or rational argument. They just cause damage. The only defense is recognition and prevention. Identify them early, limit their power, stop expecting rational behavior, accept that some damage will occur for no reason, benefiting nobody, following no logic. That's uncomfortable. We want problems we can solve, opponents we can understand, conflicts we can resolve through better analysis or communication. But some problems can't be solved. Some opponents can't be understood. Some conflicts emerge from stupidity rather than competing interests. Carlo Cipolla spent his life studying how societies managed complex challenges: monetary instability, epidemic disease, technological change. His scholarship showed how institutions could respond effectively to comprehensible problems. His essay showed why some problems remain incomprehensible, not because we lack information or intelligence, but because the actors causing them aren't pursuing goals we could satisfy or motives we could address. They're just causing damage. That's the dark truth his humorous essay revealed. And it's why people keep reading it, keep sharing it, keep finding it useful decades after publication. Because it names something everyone experiences, but few frameworks acknowledge. The world Carlo Cipolla studied, pre-industrial Europe, seems distant now. Different technology, different institutions, different problems. But the human behavior he documented hasn't changed. People still make decisions that harm everyone, including themselves. Still cause damage while gaining nothing. Still act in ways that defy rational explanation. His serious work helps us understand how those societies functioned despite these problems. His humorous work helps us understand why the problems persist. Both contributions matter. Both reveal something true about human nature and social organisation.